What if the stories of our past are not lost, but merely waiting to be uncovered? Much of what we know about our ancestors has slipped through the cracks of time. Yet, with the advancement of modern technology, we've uncovered more than we ever thought possible. The Olmec, the Maya, the Aztec. These were once great civilizations that shaped the course of history. But now they leave behind only the haunting silence of their ruins. But how did such powerful societies fall? Was it the wrath of the gods, the greed of men, or something else?
The last great Indian civilization of Mexico was developed by the Aztecs. Though they had the highest civilization in North America, most of their culture was attained by conquest. The first notice in recorded history comes from 1168 AD, when they moved into the Valley of Mexico. They were invaders from the desert to the north.
Join us as we go back in time to unearth these rich cultures. Together we will delve into these stories and retell them, starting with one of the most compelling. Our journey begins with one such tale, nearly 800 years ago. Picture a woman alone in her dwelling, her heart heavy with the weight of her people's future. The world as she knew it was shifting. Sighting upon the earth, she reached out to the gods, offering a sacred gift. Her own blood, the life essence that binds the living to the divine. Her prayer was fervent, her plea desperate. The air grew still, and then it came, a voice, deep and resounding, filling the space as if it emanated from the very fabric of the universe. It was the voice of Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war, the keeper of her people's destiny. "You are the chosen ones," the god declared, his tone both a blessing and a challenge. "You are destined to rise and endure, to carve your place in the eternal cycle of the cosmos. But your time here has ended. You must leave the land you know and journey forth into the unknown. Fear not the hardships that await, for I have set a sign to guide you. When you see an eagle, proud and untamed, perched upon a cactus and clutching a serpent in its beak, you will know that you have arrived. Only there will your destiny be fulfilled and your greatness begin." So off they went. For over 2 centuries the Mexica wandered the land, guided by the will of their god Huitzilopochtli, searching for their destined home. They endured countless trials as they navigated the shifting alliances and hostilities of the region. But at last, in the misty waters of Lake Texcoco, they saw the sacred sign, an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a snake. Here they founded Tenochtitlan, a city born of prophecy. And many years later, this city would eventually become what is now known as Mexico City. The people who founded this remarkable city were known as the Aztecs. Though they were just one of many powerful civilizations that once thrived in Mesoamerica. So join us on this journey as we explore the stories of the Olmecs, the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Spanish invasion. We'll delve into their mysterious cities, their way of life, their gods, their wars, and everything in between, unraveling the rich tapestry of Mesoamerican history. To To begin our story of Mesoamerica, we must start with the civilization known as the Olmecs. Let us journey back over 3,600 years to 1600 BCE, to the lush, swampy lowlands along the Gulf of Mexico. Here, amidst the dense tropical jungles, we might glimpse a shaman kneeling in the shadows. This shaman is about to perform a ritual. The air is thick with the smoke of burning fires, and his chants rise to the heavens. Slowly, the transformation begins. His skin curls, his bones shift, and his eyes burn with the fierce light of a jaguar. He's no longer a man. He now carries the prayers of his people and communes with the gods. Such rituals lay at the very heart of Olmec life. It was their means of unlocking the mysteries of the world. But who exactly were the Olmecs? Well, for a start, we don't actually know the original name of the Olmecs. They left no written records or inscriptions that could identify them. The term Olmec was later coined by modern archaeologists, derived from the Nahuatl word Olmeca, meaning rubber people. And indeed, rubber people they were. So, what do we know about the Olmecs? Interestingly, they were pioneers of two things we frequently use or enjoy in our daily lives. First, they invented rubber ball games, hence the nickname the Rubber People. And second, they introduced the world to chocolate. The cacao tree was no ordinary plant. It grew in the fertile lands of the Gulf Coast, where Olmec settlements flourished. But its value wasn't in its fruit, it was in the bitter, bean-filled pods hidden inside. Unlike the sweet chocolate bars of today, the Olmecs didn't eat cacao. They drank it. And not just as a casual refreshment, but as a sacred, energizing elixir. Historians believe the Olmecs were the first to ferment, dry, and grind cacao beans, mixing them with water, herbs, and perhaps a little chili or vanilla to create a frothy spiced drink. It was a drink of power, used in ceremonies, rituals, and possibly even reserved for the elite, priests, rulers, and warriors. But how do we know all this? Archaeologists have uncovered traces of cacao residue on ancient pottery, dating back to at least 1500 BCE. This discovery, made in sites like San Lorenzo and La Venta, confirmed what many suspected. Chocolate's history begins with the Olmecs. From them, knowledge of cacao passed to the Maya, who refined its use, and then to the Aztecs, who valued it so highly that they used cacao beans as currency. When Spanish explorers arrived in the 16th century, they carried this exotic treasure back to Europe, unknowingly setting the stage for a worldwide obsession. So the next time you savour a piece of chocolate, remember, you are taking part in a tradition that began millennia ago, with the Olmecs, the true pioneers of chocolate. The Olmecs emerged around 1600 BCE, deep in the sweltering jungles of what is now southern Mexico, in the modern states of Veracruz and Tabasco. Their world was one of rivers and rainforests, fertile floodplains where life thrived. Here, they built the first known cities in Mesoamerica, centres of power, religion and trade that would lay the foundations for everything that came after. The earliest of these cities was of San Lorenzo, rising to prominence around 1200 BCE. This was no simple village. It was an urban centre with massive earthen platforms and drainage systems. But San Lorenzo's dominance wouldn't last forever. around 900 BCE, for reasons still debated, its influence faded. Some believe environmental changes played a role, others suspect internal conflict. Whatever the cause, power shifted to a new city, La Venta. La Venta, thriving from 900 to 400 BCE, became the heart of the Olmec world. Here, the Olmecs built the first pyramid in Mesoamerica, a massive earth mound that still stands today. They created ceremonial plazas, sculpted intricate jade artifacts, and a continued tradition of massive stone monuments. Religion was central to Olmec life. Gods of rain, maize, and the jaguar, a powerful symbol of strength, dominated their beliefs. While they were the first great civilization, they were not isolated. Their influence spread far beyond their heartland, reaching as far as present-day Guatemala and the Valley of Mexico. Other early cultures, such as the Zapotecs in Oaxaca and the Moquaya of Chiapas, emerged during the Olmec period, sometimes borrowing from their art and religious practices. The Olmecs were traders, their networks stretching for hundreds of miles. They exchanged goods like jade, obsidian, and cacao, spreading their influence across Mesoamerica. By 400 BCE, the great Olmec cities had begun to decline. Whether due to climate shifts, resource depletion, or internal strife, their civilization faded, their cities abandoned. Yet their legacy endured. The Maya, the Zapotecs, the Mixtecs, and the Aztecs all inherited pieces of Olmec culture. You may have heard of the great bull games of the Maya and the Aztecs, the courts still standing in Chichen Itza and El Tajin. The game is even still being played by Mexican locals to this day. But long before them, it was the Olmecs who first crafted rubber, who shaped it into bouncing balls, and who built the first known courts in Mesoamerica.
Ball courts such as this were built to celebrate religious games. Also, the priests and nobles occasionally held games for amusement. Games, festivals, and musical pageants were all devoted to honoring the gods.
Over 3,000 years ago, deep in the humid jungles of the Gulf Coast, the Olmecs discovered something extraordinary. They tapped the sap of the Castilla elastica tree and mixed it with the juice of the morning glory vine. The result? The world's first rubber. They moulded it, shaped it, and created balls that could bounce, something no other civilization at the time could do. Though the exact rules remain a mystery, later versions of the game suggest it was a high-stakes contest where players used their hips, elbows, and knees to keep the ball in motion, aiming to strike it through stone rings or into marked zones. For the Olmecs, the game was likely more than entertainment. It was a sacred act, tied to their beliefs in the cosmos, the gods, and the cycle of life and death. Some scholars believe it symbolized the struggle between light and darkness, between order and chaos, and in some cases, it may have had deadly consequences. Evidence suggests that in later civilizations, losing teams, or even winners, could be sacrificed, their blood offered to the gods in a cosmic exchange. The Olmecs' passion for the game spread. As their influence reached other cultures, so did their rubber ball game. The Maya, the Zapotecs, and later the Aztecs all embraced it, refining the courts, the rules, and the stakes. Today, echoes of this ancient game still exist. In some parts of Mexico, versions of it are still played, a direct link to a 3,000-year-old tradition. And it all began with the Olmecs, the original rubber makers, the first to turn a simple game into something sacred, something eternal. There's still one more aspect of the Olmecs we're yet to delve into, and it's arguably the most famous thing this culture left behind, something that still stands pristine today: the giant Olmec heads. Carved from immense basalt boulders, each weighing between 6 and 50 tons, these colossal heads are among the most mysterious relics of the ancient world. But who do they represent? And how did the Olmecs move such massive stones through dense jungles, with no beasts of burden, no wheels, and no metal tools? The first of these heads was uncovered in 1862, but it wasn't until the 20th century that archaeologists began to understand their significance. Today, we've found 17 of them, scattered across the ancient Olmec cities of San Lorenzo, La Venta, and Tres Zapotes. Each head is unique. Different expressions, facial features and markings, leading many to believe they depict individual rulers, immortalized in stone. The Olmecs carved these heads from massive volcanic rock, sourced from the Tenochtitlan Mountains, sometimes over 50 miles away. How did they transport such enormous stones without wheels? Most likely answer: they dragged them on wooden sleds, using logs as rollers, and navigated rivers with rafts. A feat of engineering and determination, showcasing the sheer power and organization of the Olmec state. Even after the Olmec civilization faded, these heads remained, buried under centuries of earth and jungle, waiting to be rediscovered. And though the Olmecs disappeared, their influence didn't. Their art, religion and traditions lived on, inspiring future Mesoamerican civilizations. Their colossal heads serve as a reminder of the first great culture of this land. But they would not be the last. As the Olmecs faded into history, a new power was rising in the jungles of Central America. A civilization that would take Olmec ideas and elevate them to new heights. The Maya. For over 2,000 years, their culture flourished across what is now Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They built towering pyramids that pierced the sky, developed a complex writing system, and tracked the movements of the stars with astonishing precision. But at the heart of it all was something far greater: their religion. Let's take a look at how the Maya believed their world began. In the beginning, there was nothing. The endless silence of the universe. The earth laid alone in a blanket without life. Then, the gods came together. They decided to create life. With great care, they gathered the clay of the earth, molding it into the shape of men. These were the first beings. But they were fragile and imperfect, lacking the strength to move or the voice to speak. Silent, still, hollow. The gods gazed upon their work, but they were not happy. So, they tried again. From the sturdy wood of the sacred trees, the gods carved new beings. Their bodies tall and strong, their limbs firm and with purpose. But when these wooden beings came to life, they wandered aimlessly, unseeing and unknowing. and so they were lost to the woods. The gods pondered deeply, until one of them had an idea. They turned to the grain of the land, the seed that nourishes and sustains, corn. And from this grain, the gods sculpted their final creation, and thus humans were formed. They were not silent or lifeless, but full of song and spirit. The humans, like the corn that nourished them, would grow, change, and transform, but always return to the soil from which they came. And thus, the gods had created a people who would live in harmony with the earth, bound to it in a sacred, eternal cycle of life. This is the creation of the world, as told in the Popol Vuh, for the gods, in their wisdom, had found the secret of life itself, that all things, like the corn, must return to the earth, only to rise again, ever-changing, ever-renewing. Unlike the great empires of Rome or Egypt, the Maya were never ruled by a single king or empire. Instead, they built a network of independent city-states, each with its own rulers, its own dynasties, and its own ambitions. Cities like Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, Palenque, and Chichen Itza were the beating hearts of Maya civilization. Tikal, one of the most powerful, dominated the lowlands of present-day Guatemala. At its height, its skyline was filled with massive stone temples reaching over 200 feet into the sky. Monuments built not just for rulers, but for the gods. And these weren't just places of worship. The Maya built sprawling palaces, observatories, and even ball courts, where ritual games were played under the watchful eyes of thousands. But these cities weren't built at random. They followed a deeper logic, one rooted in the stars. The Maya were master astronomers, and their knowledge of the heavens shaped everything, from the placement of their pyramids to the fate of their kings. Their obsession with the cosmos led them to create one of the most advanced mathematical systems of the ancient world. The Maya developed a base 20 number system, complete with the concept of zero, something that wouldn't appear in Europe until nearly 1,000 years later. Their calculations allowed them to track celestial movements with astonishing accuracy, predicting eclipses, solstices, and planetary alignments. And then there was the Maya calendar, a masterpiece of mathematics and astronomy. Unlike our simple 365-day calendar, the Maya used multiple cycles running in parallel. The Harb, a 365-day solar calendar, marked the passing of the seasons, guiding agriculture and daily life. But the most famous of all was the long count calendar, a system that tracked time in vast cosmic cycles. It was this calendar that counted the great ages of the Maya, stretching back to their mythical creation date of 3114 BCE. One of the most prominent cities of the Maya was the world-famous Chichen Itza, a place of power, trade, science, and sacrifice. Unlike the city-states of the southern lowlands, Chichen Itza flourished long after many of its Maya rivals had fallen. Between the 9th and 12th centuries, it became the beating heart of northern Mesoamerica, blending Maya traditions with influences from central Mexico. Its vast plazas and mighty pyramids stood as monuments to its rulers, its gods, and the cosmic forces that shaped the Maya world. At its center stood El Castillo, the Temple of Kukulkan, a step pyramid nearly 100 feet, 30 meters tall, aligned so precisely with the heavens that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a shadow that slithers down its steps, forming the body of the feathered serpent god. This was not just a temple, it was a celestial clock, a gateway between the earthly and divine, but the genius of the Maya extended beyond the stars. They understood sound as well as sight. Stand at the base of El Castillo, clap your hands, and you'll hear something incredible. An echo that mimics the call of the Quetzal, a sacred bird associated with the gods. Whether this was intentional or an astonishing coincidence, it remains one of the great mysteries of Maya engineering. Yet beneath the beauty and brilliance of Chichen Itza lay something darker. A place where blood was spilled to appease the gods. The Maya, like many Mesoamerican civilizations, believed that the gods demanded sacrifice in exchange for cosmic balance, fertility, and protection. And here, at the sacred cenote, they offered some of their most precious gifts. This vast, natural sinkhole, over 200 feet, 60 meters wide, was believed to be a portal to the underworld, Xibalba. I want to journey back in time with you and witness how the ancient Maya honored their gods through this very cenote. For months the rain had failed to fall. The maize crops withered, and the wells grew shallow. The priests had read the omens. Chak, the rain god, demanded a pure soul, an intermediary to carry their prayers to the underworld. So a virgin was chosen. Her name was Ixchel, a maiden of purity. Ixchel had been prepared in the days leading up to the ceremony. So when the sun set, she wasn't nervous. She was ready. And now it was time. They made their way to their sacred site. Ixchel was calm. Her steps were steady. The priests had given her a drink of balshay, a sacred, intoxicating brew made from fermented honey and bark. In Maya culture, balshay was more than just a drink. It was a conduit to the spiritual realm. The drink's mildly hallucinogenic effects likely helped the participants cope with fear or pain. Standing at the edge of the sacred site, the priest raised his hands to the sky. Addressing the gods, he said, "Lord of rain and life, accept this offering and bless your people. For with this gift we ask for your waters in return. Look kindly upon us and answer our prayers with your divine grace." Ixchel looked down into the sinkhole. The waters shimmered in the moonlight. This was not an end, she believed, but a beginning. She was not afraid. She spread her arms, closed her eyes, and stepped forward. And took the leap of faith. The Maya would sacrifice people here as offerings to the gods. These places were considered sacred portals to the underworld, Xibalba, and sacrifices made there carried deep spiritual significance. Women, particularly virgins, were seen as pure and unblemished, making them ideal intermediaries between the mortal world and the divine. But for the Maya, being chosen as a sacrificial offering was considered a profound honor. The Maya believed that those sacrificed in such ceremonies were granted a special place in the afterlife. Their souls were thought to ascend to the heavens or be welcomed into the sacred underworld where they would reside among the gods as honored spirits. Archaeologists have uncovered thousands of objects thrown into its depths: jade, gold, pottery, and human remains. But for all its grandeur, even Chichen Itza could not stand forever. By the 13th century, its power waned, and the city was eventually abandoned. The jungle reclaimed its temples, but the Maya never truly disappeared. Yet, as Chichen Itza faded, a new power was rising in the Valley of Mexico. A civilization that would take the ideas of the Maya and reshape them into something even greater. A people who would build an empire of warriors, priests, and tribute, one that would shake Mesoamerica to its core. The age of the Maya was ending, but the age of the Aztecs was about to begin. Picture this. The year is 1325. In the middle of a massive lake surrounded by mountains and volcanoes, a group of people known as the Mexica, later known as the Aztecs, set the foundations for a city that would become one of the most impressive and advanced in the world, Tenochtitlan. Built on an island in Lake Texcoco, this city was designed to float, quite literally, on water. How? The Aztecs invented something remarkable: chinampas, or floating gardens. These were artificial islands made by piling mud and vegetation onto woven reeds. They allowed the Aztecs to grow food on water, supplying the city's population of over 200,000. Imagine fields of maize, beans, squash, and flowers, all growing on the water itself, ensuring the survival of one of the largest cities of its time. The Aztec Empire began around the 14th century, and their influence stretched far beyond their floating city. A region surrounded by mountains and lakes became their domain. The Aztecs weren't alone in the region, however. The Maya had already been thriving for centuries. But the Aztecs had something the Maya feared and respected: their fierce warrior spirit. The Aztecs saw themselves as warriors first. They believed they were destined to expand their empire and bring glory to the gods through conquest. To the Aztecs, war was sacred. They trained from childhood to fight, and their military tactics were fierce and unrelenting. In battle, the Aztecs didn't just fight for land, they fought to fuel their tribute system. Once they defeated a city, it was expected to pay tribute to the Aztec Empire. This wasn't just about taxes. Tribute could be anything from cotton, gold, and food to soldiers or captives for sacrifice. This system kept the Aztec economy booming, allowing the empire to thrive. But it wasn't all about bloodshed. These wars were as much about diplomacy as they were about conquest. Alliances were formed, tribute demanded, and in the end, the Aztecs were not only feared for their weapons, but also for their ability to manipulate the politics of the region to their advantage. But it wasn't just their military power that made the Aztecs so formidable. Their trading system was sophisticated. Their markets were vast, bustling centers of commerce, where goods like cotton, cacao, feathers, and jade were exchanged. Professional traders traveled as far as Central America bringing exotic goods back to Tenochtitlan. The markets were essential to the empire's wealth, as trade ensured the flow of resources to maintain both their military and their elites. It was through this system that the Aztecs not only survived but flourished. But all this prosperity, power, and might was about to face an unimaginable test. You see, by the time the Aztec Empire reached its zenith, the world was about to change forever. The year was 1511. A Spanish ship was sailing from the Caribbean. Its mission was routine, but fate had other plans. The ship was caught in a storm and wrecked off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. The survivors were taken captive by the Mayan people. Most of the Spaniards died in captivity, sacrificed to the Maya gods, but one man lived on. Geronimo de Aguilar, a Franciscan friar who clung to his faith and his Spanish identity. Aguilar became an imprisoned servant and learned the Mayan language, all the while dreaming of the day he might return to his people. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, for first, we must meet the man who would reshape this land and its people forever. His name was Hernán Cortés, a Spanish nobleman of modest means but boundless ambition. Cortés was cunning and ruthless, a man who could inspire loyalty and fear in equal measure. He was appointed to lead an expedition to explore the lands west of Cuba. With 11 ships, 500 men, 16 horses, and a handful of cannons, Cortés set sail. He wasn't just looking for adventure. He was hunting for gold, glory, and a place in history. But what he found would surpass his wildest dreams. In early 1519, Cortés landed on the island of Cozumel, just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. There, he heard astonishing rumours. A Spaniard who had survived a shipwreck years earlier and was living among the Maya. Intrigued, Cortés sent messengers to find him. And when Aguilar emerged from the jungle, it was a sight to behold. Dressed like a Mayan and speaking their language fluently, he was a man caught between two worlds. He immediately knelt before Cortés, declaring his loyalty and offered his services as an interpreter. But there was one catch. Aguilar spoke Mayan, not Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs. Still, he would prove invaluable. So, with a translator at his side, Cortés claimed Cozumel for the Spanish crown, and the expedition would move along the coast towards the Tabasco region. When they arrived, Cortés and his men were greeted by the Tabascan people with violence. The locals far outnumbered Cortés, but Cortés had guns and cannons, and they terrified the local people by fighting on horseback. They had never seen horses until now. They thought the horse and man were all one diabolical creature. The Tabascans surrendered and offered gifts to the Spaniards: food, gold, but most importantly a group of enslaved women. And among these slaves was a young woman known as Malinche, or Doña Marina. She spoke both the Aztec Nahuatl and Mayan, and with Aguilar translating Mayan into Spanish, Cortés now had a linguistic bridge to the Aztec Empire. But Doña Marina was more than just an interpreter. She was a strategist, a negotiator, and to some, a betrayer of her people. Through her, Cortés learned of the Aztecs and their ruler, Moctezuma II, a man whose name carried the weight of the empire. Moctezuma II was one of the most fascinating and enigmatic figures in pre-Columbian history. He ruled over an empire that stretched across what is now central and southern Mexico. Born in 1466, Moctezuma ascended to the throne in 1502, a period of rapid expansion and unrest. He was seen as a living god, chosen to lead the people by the gods themselves. His reign marked the height of the Aztec Empire, but it would also be the beginning of its downfall. Let's return to our story to see what happened next. So, Cortés marched further inland, but Moctezuma's spies watched his every move. The Aztec Emperor was no fool. He knew of the Spaniards' arrival, their horses, their cannons, and their strange pale-skinned appearance. And here's the detail that adds a chill to this tale. Many Aztecs believed Cortés might be Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god prophesied to return from the east. Unsure whether to confront or appease the Spaniards, Moctezuma chose the latter. He sent emissaries bearing incredible gifts: gold, silver, and precious stones. One can only imagine the Spaniards' reaction. To them, the gifts were not signs of goodwill, but proof of the wealth they could plunder. These gifts only fueled Cortés's greed. With the promise of riches, Cortés continued his journey forward. Along the way, he forged alliances with tribes who resented Aztec rule. The most significant of these were the Tlaxcalans. They were fierce warriors who had suffered under Aztec domination for years. The Tlaxcalans joined Cortés, swelling his ranks and providing invaluable local knowledge. But as the Spaniards drew closer to Tenochtitlan, the tension mounted. Would Moctezuma welcome them, or destroy them? Let's find out. In November 1519, Cortés and his men entered the fabled city of Tenochtitlan. It was like stepping into a dream. A city of canals and causeways, its temples towering into the heavens. Cortés had never seen a city of this size. With an estimated population of 200,000, Tenochtitlan probably outnumbered most cities in Europe at the time. Moctezuma greeted Cortés with ceremonial respect, offering even more gifts. Moctezuma even housed Cortés and his men in the palace of his deceased father. During their stay, some of the Spaniards found the secret treasure room that held the gold plates and jewels. They had never seen such a sight. At first, all seemed well between the two cultures, but things were about to take an ugly turn. 6 days after his arrival in Tenochtitlan, Cortés received news that one of his newly claimed towns had been attacked by a force of Aztecs. Cortés, alongside Aguilar, Doña Marina, and some of his captains, confronted Moctezuma, ordering him under house arrest in the palace. Despite his imprisonment, Moctezuma continued to oversee his empire. But his people were growing increasingly impatient with the Spanish and the 1,000 Tlaxcala warriors in their city. But the tensions were about to hit an all-time high, as one of the most fateful nights in the Spanish conquest was approaching. In 1520, Hernán Cortés's hold on Tenochtitlan was tested as never before. While Cortés was away dealing with a rival Spanish expedition, he left his second-in-command, Pedro de Alvarado, in charge of the city. This would prove to be a fateful decision. The Aztecs had planned an elaborate festival to honour their god Huitzilopochtli. It was a sacred occasion, marked by traditional dances, rituals and music. But to Alvarado, the sight of hundreds of warriors gathered in ceremonial attire, armed with obsidian-studded clubs and shields as part of their ritual regalia, was a threat. Whether out of fear, paranoia, or sheer brutality, he acted preemptively. Alvarado and his men attacked, slaughtering the unarmed locals within the Templo Mayor complex. Men, women and children fell to Spanish swords in what was later called the massacre at the Templo Mayor. The massacre sent shockwaves through Tenochtitlan and the Aztec world. The Aztecs, already distrustful of their Spanish overlords, now erupted into full-scale rebellion. They no longer viewed Moctezuma as a protector or even a ruler. He was now seen as a puppet of the invaders. When Cortés returned to Tenochtitlan, he found the city in chaos. The bridges and causeways that linked the island city to the mainland were heavily guarded, cutting off Spanish escape routes. Cortés, who had previously relied on Moctezuma's cooperation, now found himself surrounded by hostility. In a desperate attempt to restore control, Cortés forced Moctezuma to speak to his people from the palace walls. But Moctezuma's words fell on deaf ears. The people jeered and hurled stones, calling him a traitor to his own people. One of the stones struck Moctezuma in the head, gravely wounding him. He died a few days later. With Moctezuma dead and the city in open rebellion, Cortés knew he could no longer hold Tenochtitlan. Cortés needed a safe way out of the city. So on June 30th, 1520, Cortés and his men attempted a daring escape under the cover of darkness and heavy rain. Carrying as much gold as they could, the Spaniards made their way across one of the narrow causeways leading out of the city. But they were spotted and the Aztecs were alerted. They attacked, cutting off their escape. Many Spaniards, weighed down by their stolen treasures, fell into the lake and drowned. By dawn, hundreds of Spaniards and their Tlaxcalan allies lay dead. The survivors, battered and bloodied, regrouped on the mainland. Cortés himself wept beneath a tree, mourning the loss of his men, his treasure, and his dreams of conquest. But if the Aztecs thought they had seen the last of Cortés, they were mistaken. Retreat was not in his nature. Over the next year, Cortés regrouped, rebuilding his forces and forging new alliances with tribes eager to see the Aztec Empire fall. Armed with cannons, crossbows, and the support of thousands of indigenous warriors, he returned in 1521 to lay siege to Tenochtitlan. And so, the battle would begin. The Spaniards cut off the city's causeways, isolating it from supplies. And to make matters worse, the Aztecs were already weakened by hunger and disease. Smallpox had swept through the city, devastating its population. The odds were stacked against them. Cortez's forces launched relentless attacks by land and water, using boats to dominate the lake. Day by day, the city crumbled. Starvation gripped the population, and the once great markets were deserted. Streets were filled with the dead, their bodies piling up as disease and violence took their toll. Still, the Aztecs resisted fiercely, refusing to surrender the city that had been the heart of their empire. But on August 13th, 1521, after 75 days of siege, Tenochtitlan finally fell. The last Aztec emperor, Cuauhtémoc, Moctezuma's successor, was captured as he tried to escape by canoe. Exhausted and defeated, he surrendered to Cortez, bringing an end to one of the greatest civilizations in history. The once majestic city was now in ruin, its temples destroyed, its streets flooded with blood and rubble. Cortez wasted no time in claiming victory, declaring the land for Spain, and beginning the construction of Mexico City on top of the ruins of Tenochtitlan. The fall of the Aztec Empire marked the beginning of a new and tragic chapter in history. A civilization that had thrived for centuries was reduced to ashes, its people subjugated and its gods forgotten. The conquest was complete, but the cost, both human and cultural, was immeasurable. And so, the age of the Aztecs came to an end, replaced by the age of Spanish rule, a story of ambition, betrayal, and the relentless march of history.